All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Miller with Joint Pivot, and I just want to welcome you all to our March series of our HR Excellence series. And our topic today is going to be recruiting and onboarding. So something that was mentioned by many people when we were going through and talking about what interesting topics they wanted to be able to kick around a little bit more when it came to interesting HR topics for us to discuss this year. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about our process from an HR excellence perspective. Like I said, my name is Julie Miller of Joint Pivot, and I am your HR excellence facilitator. So if you do have questions or you have ideas on different topics that you'd like to see from an HR excellence perspective, or you have other ideas of different people we can bring in, different guest speakers, different questions you have, or if you need some resources, please feel free to reach out to me. I've got our contact information up here on the screen, and I am always excited, and hopefully we can help you out with getting some correct resources for you, or be able to conduct a webinar topic on some areas that you are a little bit more interested in when it comes to HR excellence. So just a reminder, this is part of our Saline Area Chamber of Commerce offerings. And as a reminder, we always strive for excellence with our members, our schools, our businesses, and our professionals around us, and all levels of government, to help make sure that we are keeping the Saline area and the surrounding communities an excellent and outstanding place to work and to live. And we are doing quite a bit of that. I've got some actual pictures coming from some great signs that are going out in our community shortly here as well, to be able to share how we are doing that. And I'm going to share those right now. Actually, we've got a bunch of love on local signs. As you can see, I pulled up a couple pictures of where these are being placed out in our communities today. I happen to be driving out to go pick up my dog from a Saline groomer today, and I was so excited to start to see these signs out there more and more. So I see a couple more every time I go out. So thanks to the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce. I love these Love on Locals. We have a lot of great small businesses in the Saline area that could use a little love, especially with COVID-19 out there. Some of us have had to put things on hold during the last year. So the best you can, we're open, and please go Love on Local. If you want one of these signs, you can certainly contact the Saline Chamber, or you can contact me and I'll get you in touch with the right person to make sure we can get you one of these great Love on Local signs. And then a quick word on HR excellence before we jump in. So if you are interested in more HR excellence series and events, our goal really is to go through and make sure that we are staying current on all of the different HR, finance, training, compliance trends that are out there that are with respect to HR, because we know that a bunch of heads together is better than just one. And there's a lot of things that we are learning from each other as part of these webinars, because we're bringing together really great partners from all over our community, from many different industries, who have different ideas, who have seen different best practices. So we welcome you all to be able to join us, to bring us some of those topics, and to help with some of our Q&A and bring us some of the roundtable discussion as well. So we're super excited to have you here. And know that as we continue to go through our HR Excellence series, we're going to be continuing to reach out on other topics. And what we've got here on our future topics, just a reminder on what will be up and coming based on what you guys had identified as possible future topics. So we covered the COVID-19 records and MIOSHA requirements back in January, which was a fascinating webinar to learn about all of the different requirements that we have from a MIOSHA perspective and how to stay safe. If you missed that one, it is actually up on the YouTube channel for Joint Pivot. So if you missed that one, if you want to see it, you can email me at Julie@Joint Pivot, or you can find Joint Pivot on the YouTube channel as well. So we can also get those out to you. Obviously, today we are talking about recruiting and onboarding. Our next webinar in May, we're going to be talking about succession planning. And then the following webinar in July, we're actually going to be covering some change management topics. So mark your calendars. We are looking at May 19th at 12:30 for our next webinar. And that one will be on all things succession planning. So know that that one will be out there as well. And we don't have a guest speaker for that yet. We've got a couple in the hopper, but if there is somebody specifically you would love to see on succession planning, please send their contact information to me, and I will see if they can work them in with some of our other guests that we have for that topic as well. We would love to hear from you. So today, when we were talking about onboarding and recruiting, the first person I thought of actually was Amy. And I have not met Amy in person yet because we've been doing this all during COVID. But my business partner, Jen Tankenow, had mentioned Amy. And I know I hear Amy, I hear your name all the time when I'm working with groups when it comes to onboarding and recruiting. So I was so excited when this popped up and I was like, I know who I'm going to call. I'm calling Amy. Amy is the president of Amy Cell Talent and is our guru on all things onboarding and recruiting. And Amy leads a human resources consulting firm that helps employers and our communities solve their talent challenges, which we are all dealing with right now. If you're not dealing with a talent challenge, you're just not trying hard enough at this point. Prior to launching her practice in 2015, Amy was the Senior Vice President of Talent Enhancement for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And Amy has been busy in HR a lot of her life. Some of her roles included working at Ann Arbor Spark, which I'm sure many of us have worked with as well, and at Ford, and also at the Stanford Research Institute. She's also worked, I was a little surprised by this, as a CPA for Plant Moran. I'm like, how do you go from people to, or numbers to people? We've talked about that a little bit. Amy realized that she liked people more than numbers, which is an interesting thing to admit there. I love that. I go the opposite way as we talked about as well. So we are so excited to have Amy here with us today to share her experiences on recruiting and onboarding. And Amy and I are just going to have a conversation here. We'd love for you to jump in and ask questions as we go. We have a lot of great questions that you guys had asked us as you were filling out the registration form. So we've got a lot of good information that we'll be covering. But if we miss anything or if you have follow-up questions, don't feel like you have to hold your questions for the end. You can jump right in and ask us those questions. You can utilize the chat feature of Zoom. I'll be monitoring that as well. Or if you really are shy and you want to email us afterwards, I've got Amy's contact information in there, and my contact information is at the end of the presentation too. So you can always feel free to reach out to us. And then just since we always get asked, you will get a copy of this presentation, and you'll get a link to the recording after it gets put up on YouTube as well. And we are encouraging you all to share that with other members of the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce, other employees within your work group as well, or anybody who you think would find it interesting and this topic may help out. So with that, Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm so excited to hear all of the fun, great things that you have to say today, and I am ready to learn. So I will hand it over to you, and I'm going to stop the share so we can just have a great conversation.
No, this is perfect. Just having that conversation, because I can talk for days about talent, especially around recruiting, which I have really been focusing on late. But any HR related topic, we'll definitely be touching on onboarding. But so just thrilled to dive right into any questions that you have. I know, Julie, you've got a few started, so yeah, feel free to.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I was going to share is I've actually had some very bad onboarding stories myself, where I was young. I was maybe 18, 19 years old, and I was starting on my first day on a brand new job, and I ended up getting there, and they didn't know that I was coming. Nobody knew why I was there, that I was going to be there. And then because they forgot that I was coming, they basically just had me sit at the end of somebody's desk that day and just review some blueprints and take some look at their CAD CAM systems. And I left at lunch and I never went back. And it was the most awful experience ever when it came to onboarding. So we know that onboarding actually can have a huge impact when it comes to retaining your talent, keeping your talent, kind of that word of mouth when it comes to other people on whether or not it's a good place to work or not. So one of my first questions I had, and I always like to start on a high note, is having placed as many people as you have, what has been your best onboarding experience that you've heard back either from others, either if it was yours, yourself, or from somebody that you've placed?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and more often it's organizations that don't have a good onboarding system.
Mhm.
And fortunately I haven't had anybody, like nobody's ever called me and say, hey, the person like left at lunch. So I think,
Nobody like me.
yeah, so like that's a good one, but it sets such a huge tone. And like the best ones are again when they're like you can utilize technology. So instead of somebody showing up and okay, here's a stack of paperwork that you need to do, make sure that it's a streamlined process. You're utilizing technology. As many things have been sent out in advance, benefits information, the employee, handbook and information that you're sending out, anything that can be sent out in advance, and streamlined to make more efficient, do that. So if you can utilize systems where information from their applications can be automatically filled in, so they don't have to fill in 10 pieces of paper the same way,
Mhm.
but it's just very streamlined, use technology because that sends a really good message that you are utilizing technology, you're being efficient, and you're investing in these HR systems that can make that experience better, not just day one, but when they're
Sure.
doing training and when they need to make an address change, they can just do it online. So utilize technology for sure. I think the next one is to provide an orientation. Actually, one of the stories I do like to share is when it was a manufacturing client that we had, and when we did the orientation, they would come in, and unfortunately, everything wasn't streamlined. But they'd come in, they'd fill out. I had them for the orientation in the morning, where they had to fill out a lot of paperwork. They had to sit through a kind of rigorous slide presentation talking about the different aspects. But every time the CEO, it was a family owned company. So the second generation CEO would come in to every orientation and personally introduce himself and get to know all the other manufacturing production workers there, and then we also had all the department heads came in, so they
Mhm.
really invested that time. So to see senior, and they would say that was the comments, because we would take the feedback forms after orientation where they were like, I can't believe the president came in, in the place I used to work, I never even knew who that person was. So
Sure.
they really made it personal. They also love the fact that we bought them lunch, so free food gets them every time. So having a nice, lunch at a minimum. Sometimes if you're not doing a larger orientation, but one person is starting, making sure that an employee will take them out to lunch on that first day, because I think that first day is so important. I know I was mentioning before with Julie, like when I joined one company, I remember eating, like it was like my first job after grad school, and I show up, and the guy, that my kind of like somebody that sat next to me was like, oh yeah, well the cafeteria is down there. I'm like, oh. And so I remember like going off and getting my burrito and coming back to my desk and just eating my burrito, saying, okay, this is not cool. As an HR person, this is not how you should do it. So taking people out to lunch is doing something is nice. Again, once we can do that again.
Sure.
At Spark, we had a great practice where when you would come in, everybody, and we had a small team at the time, but you would go out to lunch with each person kind of individually to get them to know them. So it was
Oh,
kind of an
nice.
orientation with everybody, and it would add, it was not a cheap investment to get like 10 lunches when somebody would start, but that was really the thought of like, yeah, I don't want to, and our CEO at the time, Mike Finney, he would say, yeah, I don't want to spend money on a going away party. I'd rather spend that money up front with everybody, getting to know people individually, because that way you get to bond with them. It's, everybody else in the company is often excited because it's like, oh, free lunch or lunch on the company, and a way to share and build those relationships one-on-one that are so important in the work environment. So those are a few thoughts that come to mind in terms of some best practices out there to think about when looking at onboarding.
Absolutely. That's such a better way to look at it, of investing in the lunches at the very beginning instead of investing in a going away party. It's like you think about, yeah, that totally does make sense when you stop and think about it in those cases. I know I started a company on a Halloween. It started on 10/31, and they told me to come dressed up because the company was really big on dressing up for Halloween. And I didn't know if this was gonna be an Elle Woods moment, that I was gonna show up in the party, with a bunny costume on and nobody was gonna be dressed up. So I made sure I put on an outfit that could very easily be changed in the car, just in case they were, like, trying to punk me or something. But it was a really, really great, environment to walk into. Granted, it was very different, but they told me and said, "Hey, our group is dressing up with this theme. What can we do to help you?" so that you can come dressed up with us in those cases. And I felt like they actually took care of me that first day to make sure that I did feel like a team member, like I wasn't coming dressed as, a rabbit when everybody else was dressed as, I think that they were doing like 90s rap moguls. So I at least fit in with them at that point, that I was like, okay, I can do this. But the fact that they took the time before I started to make sure that my first day I felt included in the group, well, I gave him a lot of grace on some of the other stuff because, as a salaried director, I was still filling out a paper application to work there. So I could look the other way when that was the situation, because I did feel like I was part of their family in those cases. So it does go a long way when you can do those little perks to make sure that somebody feels warranted in that situation.
Oh, I love that story about Halloween. That like, yeah, what a great team building opportunity.
Absolutely. I will say though, it was very difficult though the next day, because I got introduced to people in costume. So then the next day when I went back, I didn't know. I was like, were you Cleopatra yesterday? I'm not quite sure. So that part was interesting to watch out for, but it was very, very fun.
Oh,
So one of the questions that I have then as it relates to onboarding, obviously before we can even onboard anybody, we have to find them first. So what types of things have you been seeing, obviously with COVID and trying to find talent, and almost fighting for talent right now, even in some of our entry level positions? What are you seeing with respect to that?
yeah, it's tough, and it's, I mean, recruiting has always been a roller coaster, but during COVID, it's just added whole new dynamics. And so I do, and most of the work I do is recruiting. So last, March, April, everybody just shut down.
Yeah.
And there was just so much fear and concern, and just, things were grinding to a halt. Then the market got a little bit better, things started, once, it's funny because I think of like like right in October, I started to see a few signs of life in early fall, but then October was really kind of frozen because, a lot of uncertainty about the election and a lot of
Mhm.
angst, and then businesses don't like uncertainty. So whenever you're going to have an election, much less a contentious one, it's going to kind of again, that it's going to introduce that level of uncertainty that is going to kind of scare employers from hiring.
Sure.
But then after the election was settled and vaccines were rolling out, and the economy had kind of held overall in most sectors, we just started to see an amazing turn of events. And then, things slow down over the holiday. Late December is always slow because of the holidays, and people want to be able to move through a recruiting cycle pretty quickly. But come January, it was like gangbusters. I mean, January is generally the busiest month because people have their budgets. There's been, okay, things were on hold because of the multiple holidays that happened in November, December, but now we're ready to go. But on top of that, there was just so much pent up demand where many of our clients were like, yeah, we didn't, we were okay with COVID, but we were still a little bit nervous. So we kind of kept our powder dry, but now we've got 6 openings, and it's like,
Mhm.
whoa. So we just saw the explosion of need. And then, but what had happened is there were a few dynamics that were at play. One, we saw a major issue, especially women, the labor force reducing. I mean, there
Sure.
were many people that didn't want to work because of their fear of COVID. There were many people that took themselves out, primarily women, to be able to care for children that were now at home,
Mhm.
or the daycare was shut. And so especially for positions that were more traditionally held by women in that kind of early to mid career. So, for, people that had maybe between 5 and 15 years of experience, a lot of them, especially highly qualified women primarily were exiting the workforce because of the childcare issues that were
Sure.
going on. Another trend that we saw was around remote workers. So a lot of our clients were pivoting towards, remote, and we're like, our work is going to be different post COVID. We're going to be more flexible, and we're going to embrace more work. We've seen how it works, that it's effective. Maybe not ideal for everybody, but we're going to have more of our labor force, our team, be remote. And so for clients that would embrace that, they were tapping into a larger talent pool. However, since companies across the country were doing that, they
Mhm.
were creating competition for you're having even more competition for key talent. And so that's an area where we see that trend that's gonna continue. There's just gonna be more of a global national demand for talent. So it's going to be even more important to, again, provide that amazing first day experience once you get them, so that you don't lose them. Another article that I just read recently was that predicting half of the employees right now are going to be looking for jobs next year.
Okay.
Um, and you always have employees that are open to new opportunities. In fact, when I do outreach on LinkedIn, it's almost 10% of the time. Somebody that seems really happy is open to learn more about something new. So if
Mhm.
that percentage goes up to 50%, then it's going to have a lot of, there's going to be just a lot of activity, mobility in the labor market, which is going to really stress employers. And one, if you're looking for talent, you might find them, but on the other hand, you've really got to do everything you can to retain talent. Otherwise, you're going to lose the folks that you have. So it's going to be, I think, it's going to just be a crazy year ahead of us in terms of talent and recruiting.
Sure. I was reading a couple weeks ago the fact that because a lot of work can be shifted to remote, or some of these companies, like my husband's company, who has never really allowed people to work remotely before and be leaders in these cases, you'd have to move to one of their corporate offices. They're becoming far more flexible on that and realizing that you can lead effectively from a remote position, which essentially then takes the geographic pool of where you can recruit from this to like this in these cases. So it definitely pulls that up. Are you seeing that same trend as well?
Yes, exactly. I mean, which is good and bad.
Mhm.
Um, and it's kind of like you almost have to play that game. If you're not willing, if you're just going to close your doors or your options open to local talent, you're going to have a really small pool, but employers nationally are going to be going after that same pool.
Yeah.
Versus so you almost have to play the national game just to kind of keep up, because instead of going local to local, you're now in you have a national pool, but you also have national competition.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because then too, those I've read a study too as well that said that employees that work remotely 100% of the time or have never worked in the office before are like 75% less sticky. They say in
Okay.
those cases that they're more likely to leave because they don't have that human interaction in those situations. So retention becomes even more of an issue in those cases because you can't physically see if something is going wrong in those cases that they might just jump and leave and you may never know.
Yeah, and that's one of I think I mean the remote environment has, I think, a lot of pluses for people in terms of flexibility and work-life balance. But there's a lot of downsides to it. And one, it's a lot harder to feel, to sense how your employees are doing.
Sure.
And we know that there's a lot more stress. We know that some people really have a problem with boundaries and feeling disconnected from people, and it's stressing to them. And sometimes it's, performance issues kind of creep up before you know about it. It's hard to get that body language and check in. It's not the same. So all those communication strategies that are so important are twice as important in a virtual environment.
Sure. Absolutely. So, what tips or tricks do you have for those of us who are looking essentially for those entry level positions of, either people just coming out of college or even out of high school in these cases, that the competition is fierce? I know I've done a lot of recruiting trying to help find talent for some of our senior villages around this area where the same caregiver is going up for the same job that they could go over for Verizon, or they could go work at McDonald's, or they could go work at Meyer, all for the same pay in these cases. So it's kind of honing in on those situations where it seems like that's been highly competitive. So what do you have to offer on that, Amy? What advice do you
Well,
have?
that's where I am a big fan for any entry level position. I'm a big fan of development programs
Hmm.
and growing your own talent. So, and I'm going to put in a huge plug for Summer Works.
Okay.
So this is the Washtenaw County uh, program that helps young adults age 16 to 24 connect with employers. We've had 300 applicants.
Oh,
And so,
wow.
yeah, and so they're
Okay.
looking for summer. So I need internships for these folks. We also need mentors and career sneak peeks. So if you want to kind of plant the seed with a young person and do a virtual tour, that's a great opportunity. Or if you want to bring on someone as an intern, I mean, there's so much work to do. I would say and there's funding even available that can offset the cost to host an intern in some cases.
Hmm.
So I would just grow, get involved. I know we did this 3 years ago. We brought on an intern, and it can be like, oh gosh, I have to manage them, and they don't know that much. She had just graduated from high school. She was going to be enrolling at Washtenaw Community College. She was running circles over our like administrative staff, half the, twice as old as she was. And she's still with us now. We kept her on, she works part-time when she's in school, more full-time during the summer. I mean, she's a huge asset to our team, and she can do so much. So I would really, again, push internships and job shadows and getting involved at the high school level, doing events. And again, we've got this great program right in Washtenaw County that every employer can tap into. So but growing your talent is a great way. And is for more technical positions, where, apprenticeships are amazing.
Okay.
Yeah. So invest, if you grow your own talent, it's the best way to retain those talent. I mean, as I remember when I was putting together an apprenticeship type program at the state level, and we had this amazing group of employers that was helping to design the curriculum, and
Hmm.
somebody made the comment, well, why are you investing in your talent and training them? They might leave. And then her response was, well, what if you don't invest in them and they stay?
Hmm.
So just investing and in the loyalty that you're going to get from investing in people is key. I think that's one of the biggest ways that you can retain talent, is help them continue to grow. Because that's another trend that I've seen, is once people feel like they're not growing, then that's when they start looking. Because hey, it's not the market that I actually thought I entered when I graduated from
Sure.
college. I joined Ford Motor Company. I'm like, yep, I'm going to be here 30 years in full retirement, and then that didn't work out like that. Now, it's the number of job changes that people make is just, it's a huge shift. And so people are aware of that. There's not the same career loyalty, but they know that, hey, as long as I'm getting skills, then I'm going to be able to be marketable. And hey, if this employer keeps investing in me, why would I ever leave if if everything else is going well?
Yep, absolutely. And Lana wanted just the name of the program for Washtenaw people age 16 to 24.
Oh,
That was Summer Works.
summer works.
Okay,
I will put in a link to it in the chat as well, because we have an
perfect.
information session tomorrow morning. And then the due date for applications is April 9th
Okay,
for internships. So that's where, again, this program is very, very, I love it. So I'll get the link and I'll put it in the chat. And if you have any questions, I'll add my contact information in there as
perfect.
well, so that you have it.
And I have to say, as you were talking about that, that's actually how I grew up for my co-op jobs in high school. So I actually took a uh, co-op job in high school where I worked the last 2 hours of my day doing CAD CAM mechanical design for a local company. And they ended up paying for my undergraduate degree. And then I stayed there for 6 more years after my undergrad. I was there for 9 years total. So that started me as a co-op. And it was such an interesting opportunity because I absolutely adored it. I learned and loved those people as I was there. The only reason I left is because I moved out of that area. Otherwise, I probably would have stayed there for quite a while, but I've learned so much from them. And they too got incentives for having me there, that a portion of my salary was covered, one by the school and two by the state. So it was a good tax deduction for them as well. So I'm a huge proponent of that. I tried to get my nephew into that back in Wisconsin. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. I'd highly recommend that because you can find some really, really great talent out there. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Great.
Awesome. And I also wanted to say too, when you said when people feel like they stop growing, then they start looking elsewhere. How do you feel when it comes to growth? That growth is not just always up. Sometimes growth can be side to side. It can be that horizontal growth as well. What are you seeing around that and kind of offering people other opportunities, but within the same company?
Oh yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, growth into new skills. And it is a pyramid, right? So there's fewer, there's the base of the pyramid where there's
Mhm.
lots of opportunities as individual contributor. there aren't as many managers and companies have gotten flatter. So there's fewer manager roles and then obviously even fewer executive roles. So, and there's always a lot of competition for those because,
Mhm.
with companies downsizing or startups spinning out or getting acquired, I always see a very high number of executives that are looking, they're always because, they found themselves available, as well as you have manager, that manager level that's looking to get to the executive level. So there's always a ton of competition for those executive opportunities. And then on the manager level, the same thing. You've got managers that have been displaced that are looking to stay at their level. Plus, there's other people want to grow. So if you only look at growth based on kind of moving up a different level or starting to supervise or becoming an executive, you're going to be disappointed. Just the numbers are not there. So being able to provide growth opportunities that add to your skills, doing cross-functional rotations or being a team leader if you're not able to supervise, whatever those skills are in your personal plan. I'm a huge proponent of really pushing cross-functional training programs. Just that is, it's a win-win for the company. Then you've kind of cross-trained people so that it helps with your succession planning. It helps if somebody, wins the lottery or gets a new job or has to leave, you've got that backup in place. So and it's just for business continuity. For so many reasons, it makes sense to cross train, and people love learning new skills.
Mhm.
And so I'm, yeah, a huge fan of that because the opportunities to progress aren't huge. Another tip I would have is where you can for larger companies having like a series promotion. So maybe you're a technician, a 3, then a technician 2, then a technician 1. So your role isn't really changing. You don't have to supervise other people to get a jump, but you're demonstrating competency so that, you're thinking to yourself as an employee, oh, okay, well, I can show an in-series promotion on my resume or LinkedIn. It's going to show growth. It's going to show career projection that will be attractive to an employer. So lots of different ways you can do that. I know at my company, we have associates, then senior associates, consultants, senior consultants, managers, directors, vice presidents. So now we have lots of levels that
Mhm.
people can be in where a lot of times, until they get to manager, the work really isn't that different. But, we give these promotions every 2 years so people feel like they're continuing to grow and adding to their resume and showing again that progression.
Absolutely. And I know progression plans is one of the things we'll be talking about in our succession planning webinar that's coming up in May, because sometimes when we start out as small companies, we don't really have that in mind. And I will say, as the person who has cleaned up that after multiple companies, after we've gotten too big and had to put that into place, it's a lot easier to do that from the start. It's a lot less painful, and people's feelings are hurt a lot less when we put some thought into that from the very, very beginning, instead of trying to do it to people after they've already been in these positions for a while, because that can sometimes get kind of sticky there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Good, good. So then another question that we have as well is recruiting when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So helping to bring in more of a sense of belonging and bringing in some names and faces that we might not be as used to, which I think is fantastic, to bring in some other ideas, get some fresh minds, get rid of the groupthink that we have in a lot of these cases. What are you seeing around that, and what tips do you have for us?
Oh, it's been a huge issue, and in a really good way, I would say. So, I mean, for since I've been in this business, with my firm, I've had people that have really been intentional about diversity. Like, okay, my marketing team is all women. Can you try to,
Hmm.
make sure we have a candidate pool that has lots of men in it or a few men in it,
Hmm.
or whatever it is that people are looking for. They want, so employers have been more intentional around it. I do a lot of municipal recruiting where we kind of have like the Rooney rule where I always want to have a diverse applicant pool. I mean, that's a goal that I will have. So, but then with the events last summer with George Floyd and the just awakening of racial injustice, we have seen a huge focus on it from many of my clients. I mean, I actually do some DEI recruiting or DEI consulting as well, and have just been in a lot of conversations where companies have not, on the culture side, they've not handled it perfectly well because it is a topic that can be very emotionally laden, and depending on how it's handled, can be challenging. And so, but companies that are intentional about it and thoughtful, I've seen, they're really taking their culture to the next level and focusing on hiring people more intentionally that have a diverse perspective. So, like I was talking to one engineering company and they're like, well, we want more diversity. Well, where do you recruit from? Oh, Michigan Tech. Okay, well, look at the demographics from Michigan Tech versus, say, and for women and underrepresented minorities versus, Wayne State or Eastern Michigan
Sure.
University. So, or obviously historically Black universities and colleges, and then you can diversify your pool. Also being careful, while everybody likes employee referrals, and that's great, usually, there people do tend to stick to people that are more similar to them.
Yep.
And so if you only hire people through employee referrals and networking, which is about 70 to 80% of the time how people find their jobs,
Mhm.
the people that are in your networks are going to land in your companies. So being intentional about hiring on different job boards or contacting Michigan Works, or just being, again, more strategic in building those partnerships will give you a more diverse pool. But yeah, it's been a huge area of emphasis that I've seen with my clients, both to make sure that, they're promoting a diverse set of candidates, that they're hiring a diverse set of candidates, and that their environment has a very strong sense of belonging for everyone, to bring your authentic self to work, whether that is on the LGBTQ side, which we're seeing a lot of energy around, making sure that transgender changes are handled well, and so that create a sense of belonging. And so lots there that I'm thrilled to see, companies embracing.
But that's fantastic. It's great to be able to see that and to think back, that the majority of people who are moving into positions are usually because of referrals and resources in those cases. And I can tell you from some of the executive coaching that I've been doing with, I would, and this has been all around Michigan and all around the nation as well, because I have a lot of clients that are outside of Michigan. But it's funny because when it comes to recruiting people who are not, I would say, similar to them or like them in these cases, it's usually sitting on the hiring leader that's recruiting them that is uncomfortable. So sometimes us as leaders in those cases need to do work on ourselves to make sure that we are thinking from a more diverse perspective and we're comfortable with bringing everybody's different visions and views into play. So it's great to see that it's getting more mainstream out there and we are really working on it. And I'm glad people are opening up quite a bit. Fantastic. Good. I have another question for you as it relates to too much fluff out there. So, a lot of people who are dipping their toe in the water to see out there, but obviously, from the recruiting side, then we're trying to find candidates out there and we're running into a lot of extra work of people who aren't really ready to make a leap, but they're more interested of dipping their toe in the water. What advice do you have for us around that when it comes to like online searches and where we should be looking? And how do we get through all of the non-interested candidates out there that are just noise?
Yeah, yeah. So one of my biggest tip here is to do a survey immediately when people apply.
Mhm.
So, um, my kind of view on recruiting is, just in a nutshell, number one, really understand what you're looking for
Mhm.
and being very clear, and boiling it down to like 3 to 5 must-haves. You don't need a list of 20 job duties, and the last one is and other duties as assigned. You don't have to have a list of 10 preferred or desirable qualifications. What are those 3 to 5 really core things that they have to have? And
Mhm.
then having a short and sweet job posting that markets the good things about your organization and focuses people on those key must-haves. So they can clearly screen themselves in. And I always hate when I see like 5 years of experience. Like, okay, 5 years, what 5 years could be? Is that dog years? I mean, somebody's experience with a startup where they're doing a ton of things is very different from somebody that's been in a big company. So, I mean, I hate it when I see years of experience because you never know what that really means.
Mhm.
But have a few things in there about the job duties, and then again, know what your must-haves are. Make it easy for someone to self-select in so that you have the option. It's a funnel, right? You want as big as at the top as possible. You want everybody to want to apply, not to be scared off because, oh, well, it said 5 years. I just have 4.5. I better not apply. No,
Mhm.
you want them in the funnel, but then very quickly, because you do get a lot of fluff for people that are applying to like send. They've applied to 50 jobs just, in the last, since we've been talking today, right? You
Right.
want them to be able to quickly screen out who's serious, but also so many job seekers come to us and they complain that like they never heard back anything.
Mhm.
So for qualified candidates, but you also don't want to call everybody or try to reach out to everybody, although texting is the good way to get in touch with them now,
Sure.
because it takes a lot of time to schedule interviews and to see who's serious. So I recommend a survey, like a 5-question survey that you send out to any qualified applicant immediately, very, very quickly. If you have an applicant tracking system, this can be programmed in there really efficiently.
Sure.
And the key things I'm looking for are why are you interested? Why do you think you'd be a good fit? Compensation expectations, and maybe 1 or 2 things that are really important that you wouldn't see on the resume. So I know we're doing a mechanical engineer position right now, but we really want somebody that's done hands-on work,
Mhm.
either machining, or if they do stuff on the side, they might have a hobby that involves hands-on work. So we need that. Might not be, if they fix up their car every weekend, or built a classic car, or we're on a solar team or formula car racing team in college, that might not necessarily be on as their resume. So we'll add a question like that to pull it out. Then once you get the resume back, and then the survey, which will provide a writing sample, you'll get to see a little bit of their personality. And if they send it back within 24 hours, like, oh, they're serious and they're qualified, I've got a writing sample, I know what their compensation expectations are, I can pick up the phone and call them or set up an interview.
Sure.
And so that is my, kind of my key tip on making the recruiting process efficient and effective.
Absolutely. And it's great that you said that because, having hired a lot of technical people in my life, I'm a mechanical engineer by undergrad, so I get that. And I do a lot of hiring when it comes to project managers, continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma. It's hard to like weed through who actually can bluff their way through those tools and who actually really knows about it. And I always say for anybody who's looking at interviewing for those types of positions, I will 100% look for charisma and attitude and the ability to work with a group of people. I can teach the technical skill. I can't teach you to not be dull and boring in a room. So I will always look for that aspect of it. It's fantastic. And then the other questions I have for you as it relates to what should you be essentially asking for? Like, what tips do you have when you're interviewing somebody for a position? Because I've been at companies where I love behavioral based interviews and I love asking these sets of questions. One company that I interviewed basically was just asking a bunch of questions about myself in these situations, where at the end of it, and I was like, do you want to know that if I'm even qualified for this job at all? What would you recommend in those cases? And what are you seeing? What type of trends are you seeing in that area?
Yeah, so I, going back to what you want, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's really important for organizations to understand what those key must-haves are, and then designing an assessment process that gets to those.
Mhm.
And I like behavioral-based interviews because they can be very specific. Giving past examples, past behaviors are the best way to predict future behaviors. So I think understanding what people have done, giving them a similar situation, seeing their approach to it is great. Um, I think having open-ended questions too, though, can be very helpful in terms of just getting to know what someone is like. Like if you're asking, what is your ideal work environment like?
Mhm.
And you don't tip them off because but if you have a very straight-laced formal one, everyone's in at 8 and leaves at 5 and works really hard, versus more laid back or team or collaboration, if there's something you want to know what people authentically feel. So like providing a few open-ended questions just to get to know more about someone's behavior, or what are the top 3 things that you look for in a coworker, or anyway. So there's lots of ways you can design that, but I also like assessments, if you can somehow simulate the environment, or
Mhm.
needs to be made, test for that, because people can really be good interviewers and are good at answering behavioral based questions. But if you like need really detail oriented spreadsheet work, have somebody come in and give them an example so you can see how they do. Or if writing is really important, or tact or judgment, you can design short assessments or assignments to do that. For executives, put together, have somebody come in and give a presentation to the team about their, 90-day plan, or here's a problem that we're facing. How would you handle it?
Sure.
And especially at the, again, I wouldn't give that to everybody, but once you've narrowed it down, because some people are like, I hate wasting time on things, and but once you really narrowed it down for those key roles, people will understand, okay, we need to get to know you well. We want to make sure it's a good fit. Yes, we're asking you to prepare for an hour, but it's going to be worth it for both of us in the end.
I say preparing for an hour for hopefully a job that you have for 5 to 10 years. I don't think it's too much to ask in those cases. Absolutely. We used to give people a test on projects. So putting together a base project plan, problem statement, objective statement, just to see how they would do in those situations. I know I myself has had to give presentations where I had to teach and train on a tool for a job where I was doing a lot of training. And it was those places where I was like, okay, that's where I want to go work, because they care enough to spend the time to see if I can actually do it in those situations. I really enjoyed that. Good. And then one of the other questions I have is, what do you think is the biggest mistake we make when it comes to trying to recruit people?
Not moving fast enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, good talent is going to leave quickly, and they want to feel wooed. And so, if you don't get back to somebody when they apply, you have them wait for weeks after you interview them. Right now in a hot talent market, they're going to leave. In slower talent markets, they might join you, but they're going to be a little bit mad at the beginning and again, that just doesn't set it off on the right foot, which is, going to affect your retention.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We've lost, I would say, a lot of good candidates in the last 10 years where people are like, hey, we just made a decision. We had to move and go. And this was good. I would have loved to have come to you. But in some situations, hey, if we're not moving quick enough or not making a decision quick enough, that certainly does impact it. I know one of the best practices in a company that I worked for, which I thought was fantastic, is whenever they were hiring for a position, any of the hiring leaders or people who were on the interview team basically made a commitment that they would make themselves available within 72 hours for an in-person interview, so that it wasn't something that would need to be scheduled in like a week and a half, which I thought was fantastic. Like setting that expectations up right away when you're asking somebody to be part of the interview team, to make sure that they were available in those situations. I loved that one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Good. All right. And Lana, I love your always looking for smart, hungry, and humble candidates. Absolutely. That is true. Aren't we all in those cases? Good, good. Well, I think that covers the majority of questions that we had that came into us from a registration perspective, and some ones that I had thrown out there as well. What I would love to do is, if there are any questions that you guys have from a participant perspective that you'd like to be able to ask us, feel free to throw those into chat or unmute yourself and go ahead and ask us questions if you have them. And we'll give you just a couple of seconds here to unmute yourself or throw them into chat if you have any other questions for us. Or Amy, if there's any other topics that we needed to hit today that maybe we didn't with our questions.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot. This was great.
I gotta go out and hire people now. Fantastic.
Amy, this is Rachel. It's a little off topic, but kind of relevant. I was wondering what you've seen with your clients who are bringing people back to the office or starting to think about that. It's kind of like onboarding all over again to a certain degree. Have you heard any awesome things that people are doing that we should consider for that kind of first day back in the office?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, we're working on a fact sheet for that like right now. So, but I think that it's I would be so intentional. Yeah, I mean, treat it like I would celebrate it. I would bring in food, maybe have gift baskets, get some nice swag, figure out where Julie got that cool joint pivot, like pull over, give one of those for everybody. I mean, I would hype it up. I survived COVID. I don't know. I mean, just like embrace it, because a lot of people enjoyed the flexibility. And so you want to kind of speak to those folks that might not be thrilled with coming back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but you also want to just be really positive and embrace the opportunity to celebrate that we've gotten to this far. So yeah, treating it like it's the best orientation day you've ever had, and make people feel wanted, and balloons and a party and celebrations. I mean, everything you can double down on in terms of employee engagement and experience, pack into that day or week, and then really just double, because if you want, you're going to need to keep these people. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a war for talent. Now that more and more companies are going remote, they're going to go after your people nationally. So making sure that all of your systems are aligned in terms of rewards and recognition, acknowledgement, everything, experiences, picnics, anything you can do, Zingerman's bake things, virtual, anything you can do to attract, retain, to retain and develop your talent, again, focusing on development, having kind of stay interviews, right, where you meet with people quarterly or semi-annually, just to say, how are you doing? What can we do for you? Where do you want to go in your career? How can we get you there? What training can we get you? What do you like? You want a different office chair? What is it that we can do to keep you there? But everything, I think people are going to need to double down. Otherwise, the talent is going to be snapped up and they're stressed, and they, might be, looking around, and that's where it's when the economy does better and there's more demand, people start looking around. When the economy isn't that good and people like, okay, there's no jobs out there, I'm just going to be heads down, not even going to update my LinkedIn profile or look around. It's safe, but once a churn starts, then, the volatility of the labor market really accelerates.
Absolutely. And I will add to that too. We've been doing, we've got 2 clients right now that we're doing return to work change management plans for. So utilizing the concepts of ADKAR, of awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement, and then identifying all the different possibilities of resistance that we think we might see, and then putting deliberate plans and measurements around that, of everything that we can possibly think of that could go wrong as to why people would not want to come back to work in those situations. And then doing our best from a desire perspective to certainly make it fun, and then figure out exactly what it is that they want. Instead of what we are seeing, and I will always caution people on this one, that right now the people we are working with on these return to work plans are people who want to return to work. They're working in departments that are people. So they're like, why wouldn't people want to come back to work? It's those people who don't want to come back to work that we need their insight. So how can we bring them into the planning process to figure out what they actually would like to see when they're coming back as well? Because it's likely not the same as a people person would want to see when they come back to work as well. It's like too much. And they're putting together this cute little booklet of things that have happened since. So it's a fun, like a picture book that they have. My husband just got COVID quarantines from his company that is personal stories of every single month of some cool things that happened during the time that they were off work as well, with some family pictures in there to show some of the trips that they were able to take during COVID. So showcasing some of that fun stuff that has happened too, I think would be really, really helpful. That is a great question, Rachel.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks both. Julie, what was the acronym that you said?
It is
ADKAR?
ADKAR. Yeah, ADKAR, awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. Also the topic of our July webinar.
Yeah, change management. Prosky. Yeah, way to
Yes,
go.
absolutely. All right. Any other questions?
Hey, this is Clint. Getting back to the original topic about onboarding, my company, I think, does it pretty good. We have a welcome. We use the first day to talk about benefits. I'm given a schedule and I've got to follow that. And that goes for a couple of weeks. And then we even do a survey at the end to find out how we went so we can feed back and improve the process. But I want more. Is there something modern or an edge or something quirky that you've heard other companies are doing to really, I don't know, modernize onboarding and make it the best it could be?
I wish it was more exciting, Clint.
You can only do so much with benefits. Yeah, sometimes videos, again, presentations, one-on-one meetings, but Tours are good, I think. Yeah, I've seen those be effective where people can, especially into different departments. So if somebody's not in a manufacturing role, but having them go through manufacturing, even working the line. Actually, one of my clients, they would have everybody work the line a day
Mhm.
to be able to get to experience it. I'm not sure if that's, where that falls on people's experience, but it really, gets you knowledgeable and relatable to everybody in the organization. So,
Sure.
but that's, I'm gonna have to do more like compilation of best practices on this one. This is inspiring.
Yeah, and I would say it's not necessarily modern, but some of the feedback we've gotten when people really feel comfortable. Now, granted, I deal with a lot of people on the numbers and the engineering side, but we would put together basically their calendar for the first month that they were going to be there. So here's all the meetings you're going to have, here's everything that you're going to learn. And we would send that to them a week before they would start so that they didn't have to worry about what their day was. They weren't sitting there at 3 o'clock on the first day being like, great, I'm just going to sit here and read through my benefits package this afternoon, and I don't know what I'm coming in and doing tomorrow. Every day we had something scheduled for them. Granted, as we got to weeks 3 and weeks 4, it was less scheduled throughout the day. But we made it so that their first month there was pretty much a breeze, that we were making sure they were talking who they needed to talk to. They didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to lift a finger when it came to that.
That's a really good idea. Thanks.
I have a good template on that, Clint, if you'd like me to send that over to you.
Sure.
I do.
Thanks. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, then I'm just going to bump back to sharing my screen here. And we are at the end of our presentation here today. So thank you all for joining us for this hour, and special thanks to Amy. You've got such great insight. I've learned a lot today. I don't know if I'm excited or if I'm happy that I don't have to hire anybody. There's a lot of scary things out there, but a lot of really great things to be able to think about in these cases. And for all of you, I can't wait for you to join us for our next HR Excellence webinar on succession planning, where we get to talk about what do we do with these candidates once we get them in, and how do we keep them sticky, and how do we keep them within our groups. So like I said, I will be sending all of this information out to everybody who is on the webinar or registered for the webinar, as well as our group list for HR Excellence. So you'll get a link to our recorded presentation. I will copy along Amy's information there as well, so you are welcome to reach out to her with any questions. And Amy, any final words here today?
No, just thank you so much for the opportunity. It was really a pleasure, and I really appreciate you, Julie, and the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce.
Wonderful. Sounds good. Well, I hope everybody can enjoy just a little bit of this last nice weather, hopefully before it starts to rain here shortly. And have a great afternoon. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. See ya.